Listen to the voices of the advocates.
For the second interview, we will be speaking to Team 5 judges. Now, this, of course, refers to the 5 judges of the Supreme Court. We had the late Tan Sri Azmi Kamarudin, the late Tan Sri Yusofi Abdul Qadir, the late Tan Sri Wan Hamza Muhammad Saleh, the late Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman Pawante, and the late Dato George Sia. These 5 judges paid the price professionally for carrying out their judicial duties and always stood firm in their belief in the separation of powers underpinning the rule of law.
Tonight, we'll be hearing from some of the practitioners who represented the 5 judges in the investigation before the Constitutional Tribunal in 1988. We are honored to have them here with us. Please join me in welcoming Tan Sri Dato Cecil Abraham, Dato Loh Siew Cheang, Tan Sri Muhammad Ariff Yusof, Mr. Wilfred Abraham, Mr. Robert Lazar, Mr. Philip Koh, and Mr. Wong Chong Wah. This interview will be conducted by Alex De Silva acting as himself and Razlan Hadri Zulkifli. Mike, over to you guys.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming back and managing to tear yourself from the drinks section over there. I hope you're all seated because now is the turn of the second tribunal. And with the greatest of respect to the first tribunal, as opposed to them, they actually did some work. But before I start, could I just have the rather unenviable task to follow on from Gopal Srinivasan and try to give some sense how the second tribunal was constituted and why there was a need for the second tribunal and why the need for our eminent guests here was required. So what happened was simply this, and because I'm quite a lazy fellow, I will read from paragraph 5.13 of the original second tribunal report, which was extensively and quite well written by, if I may say so, Tan Sri Edgar Joseph Jr. And this is what Tan Sri Edgar said. On the 28th of June 1988, Tun Salleh made an application to the High Court in Kuala Lumpur for leave to apply for an order of prohibition against the members of the tribunal, you guys have heard this already, on various grounds, restraining them from making any investigation, a report, or a recommendation. That application was partly heard in the High Court by Dato Ajaib Singh. The phrase partly heard was extremely generous on the part of Tan Sri Edgar, who on the morning of the 1st of July 1988 adjourned the matter to the afternoon, and in the afternoon at about 3:45, he then adjourned the matter to 10 a.m. on the 2nd of July 88, and that's the Saturday. On the 2nd of July, the matter was called up at approximately 11:45, and after hearing at about noon, he adjourned the matter to the Monday, 4th of July 88. He also refused an application for a limited stay. And he said, and you all have heard this from, I think, Dato Darul, and he said, I needed to consult the AG for that. And he then adjourned for the day. A few minutes later, Raja Aziz Adrus, leading counsel for Tun Salleh, together with the other lawyers, came to Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman's chambers and, having explained the situation, asked Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman to convene a special sitting of the Supreme Court as a matter of grave urgency to enable him to apply for an order to preserve the status quo. So just remember this. They're not asking for something radical, they're just applying to preserve the status quo. And Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman then, purporting to act under Section 9 of the Court of Judicature Act, convened an immediate special sitting of the Supreme Court bench consisting of 5 judges. Sitting started at 12:50, finished about half an hour later, and unanimously granted the oral application made by Raja Aziz for a limited stay, which is this: merely to restrain the first tribunal from submitting their report or recommendation or advice to His Majesty the Yang di-Pertuan Agong until further order. And that is all. And to those of you who are wondering, why did Raja Aziz Adros amble into Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman's chambers? This is because Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman was the most senior unconflicted judge of the Supreme Court. What I mean by unconflicted is this: the office bearers of the days were all empaneled in the first tribunal. The Chief Justice of Malaya, Tun Hamid Omar, was acting as Lord President. Clearly he can't hear. Clearly he was conflicted. And Tan Sri Lee Han Ho, the CJ for Sabah and Sarawak, was also empaneled in the first tribunal. So Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman was left. And by this time, Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman was already a Supreme Court judge before that federal court, of course, for approximately 14 years, having been elevated in May 1974 at the ripe old age of 46 years old. They promote these people early those days. And so what did Tan Sri Sulaiman do after hearing Raja Aziz in chambers? Tan Sri Sulaiman called four of his colleagues, Tan Sri Josiah, who on Tan Sri Sulaiman's instruction rushed back from Kota Baru, resulting in an adjournment of the Supreme Court sitting there. And then he managed to get Tan Sri Yusofi Abdul Kadir, Tan Sri Azmi, and Tan Sri Wan Hamzah to hear this application which I've just read. And this is what happened. And before I start, ladies and gentlemen, and I will start soon, I promise, just one last thing. But I just, for the record, read up names of counsel who was involved in the second tribunal. Mr. Wong Chong Wah, together with the late Mr. Vinayat Pradhan and Mr. Philip Koh, acted for Yang Arif Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman. The late Mr. R.R. Setu, together with Mr. Robert Lazar, acted for Yang Arif Dato Josiah. Encik Allahyarham Encik Ghazi Ishaq, together with Allahyarham Mr. Christopher Fernando, and Encik Ariff Yusof acted for Tan Sri Muhammad Azmi. Tan Sri Yusofi Abdul Kadir assisted in person, or acted in person, but assisted by Mr. Cecil Abraham. A most unenviable task, as we will discover, I'm sure. And lastly, Mr. Wilfred Abraham, who cross-examined the future Chief Justice of Malaya. Together, he acted with Mr. Loh Siew Cheang and acted for Yang Arif Tan Sri Dato Wan Hamzah. Welcome, gentlemen. And so we start the ball rolling. Can I invite Mr. Alex De Silva to ask the first question? Alex?
All right, thank you, Razlan. I'm going to ask the first two questions. Razlan will do the first two. I'll start with Mr. Wong Chong Wah. The reason being, we all thought that Tan Sri Cecil was the most senior among the lot of you, but we discovered that Wong Chong Wah was slightly more senior than Tan Sri Cecil, actually. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Wong. Can you tell us how this team came about? Because we already heard how the first team was formed. Can you tell us how this team was formed? And you also have a diverse group of people, and you were put in various teams acting for the 5 judges. Can you tell us how this happened?
Depending on who you speak to, the stories could be a bit different. So I think every one of the story is true, but it's just that things happen simultaneously. Cesar heard something else, but my recollection is this. The late Dato Peter Muni was first approached because he was one of the most senior and eminent lawyers. But for some reason, he didn't take on the task. So then, the judges started looking for local counsel to manage defense. My own recollection is one afternoon, I got a call from the late Wan Sulaiman, Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman, to say I would like you and a few other lawyers to come to our chambers. And that time it was still at the Abdul Samid building. So we were there, I, Cecil, if I remember. So we were then asked whether we were willing to take on the task of looking after their interests. As you know, most of us came from large firms, and we said we would have to go back to our partners to find out whether they have any objection. We are grateful that none of the partners in any of the firms objected. And because we knew that there would be consequences. Then when we came back and we told them that we were quite happy to take on the task, they then asked us, I don't know whether it's the same subsequent meeting, which meeting, who are the other lawyers we would like to get involved in defense of their cases. So we started recommending the names, and here we are, all of us. Started with just a few of us, but end up with a team.
Right, thank you, Mr. Wong. Moving on, Tan Sri Cecil, we just heard that Tan Sri Yusofi Abdul Kadir decided to act for himself. And you were given the unenviable task of assisting him, presumably because you were one of the more senior lawyers in the team. Can you tell us how that was like?
Well, actually, what happened was I was in Johor Bahru on the 6th of July before Mr. Justice Mansour. And then the secretary to Justice L.C. Wara, the senior judge, walked in and they had a conversation. And then the next thing, Justice Mansour adjourned the matter and said, if I could go and see Justice Wara. And when I went to see him, I was told by him that Justice Yusofi, I was just told at that time that the 5 judges had been suspended. And if I could get back because Justice Yusofi wanted to see me. I saw him that night in his house, and he said if I could arrange to see him and the other 5 judges in there. Now, the other judges were not permitted to come into the building. For some reason, Yusofi was able to still go to his chambers. So on that morning, I met with all the 5 judges. I can't remember whether Chong Wah was there, but I think we were then told to put together a team. And what Justice Yusofi told me was, you can get your team, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to act in person, and you are to assist me. So I said, fine. And then we got the team together. I think Chong Wah got, Philip and the late Vinayak. I called Loh Siew Cheang and he got Ariff. And then since I was in Shern at that point in time, I got Wilfred and Robert involved as well. And then got the late Dato Sedu involved. Justice Azmi said that he wanted Christopher Fernando to act for him. And that's how Ghazi came into the picture as well. I think now, insofar as acting for Tan Sri Yusofi was concerned, he told me that he wanted to make the opening address. I said, that's not a problem. And then he produced his opening address. We all had a look at it. I suppose no one disagreed with what he was going to say. Okay. And, I did suggest to him perhaps we should do A, B, or C. And he said, no, that's what we're going to do. And one of our first tasks was to disqualify Hashim Yoksani. And so Yusofi did that principal submission as such. And I think one of the problems that we faced was, we had among the judges a judge from Sri Lanka who was Roman Dutch qualified and who hadn't a clue what bias was, the English cases and so forth. So, Justice Panch Kumarasamy, who was on the panel during the tea break, said, Cecil, can you please, educate this judge because he doesn't seem to know what his concepts are.
Well, you mentioned the recusal application of Tun Sri Hashim Yop.
Yeah. Just to follow on that, question to Mr. Wilfred Abraham. The hearing started with that, the first thing, i.e., your the team's attempt to recuse Tun Sri Hashim Yop Sunny. Now, could I ask, what was the feeling among the lawyers with regards how the tribunal was going to react to that particular objections, knowing fully well the first tribunal gave short shrift to any application to disqualify Tun Hamid Omar?
If you are talking of the lawyers acting for the second tribunal, we were in no doubt that Justice Yop Sunny will refuse to recuse himself. I mean, that's the way we looked at it, right. And that was how we thought it was going to go. But I think, this is my own speculation, Justice Yop Sunny found this an absolute excuse to get out of it. He didn't want to get involved in this for many reasons. There are lots of unverified stories about Justice Yop Sunny as to his involvement first tribunal and also with the ruling party, UMNO, but it's all unverified. So I think within his own mind, he said, look, this is an absolutely great idea. These chaps are going to come to me in the morning and say, you please step down. I'm going to think about it. And the next day I'm going to tell you I'm going away. And that is what happened. So 2 things. 1, we were of the view that he won't recuse himself. And on the second day, we were absolutely surprised.
Oh, okay.
Dato Loh Siew Cheang. It is on record that the lawyers acting for the 5 judges had indicated to the tribunal prior to the start of the tribunal hearings that you were going to call Tun Sri Hamid Omar and Tun Sri Hashim Yop Sunny would be required as witnesses for the 5 judges before the tribunal had started, right? However, both these judges were later not called as witnesses. Can you tell us why?
A long story behind this, actually. I mean, the decision was made much differently. This man doesn't understand the cry of distress is someone's rescue. That was the first reason. And the second reason that we didn't want to call Tun Sri Hamid Omar was simply because we got it out all from the other judges, which was Tun Sri Haida.
Yeah.
I think he should tell you the story about the seal.
That's coming. Sorry, just to follow up on what Dato Loh Siew Cheang just mentioned about a revolution. To put it in context, what happened here was this. Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman had decided he was going to convene a panel of, in fact, 7. He wanted to convene a panel of 7, in fact. And he had approached Tun Sri Hashim Yop Sunny on the morning of the 2nd of July and asked him to sit with the 5 judges. And I think the one missing was Harun Hashim, who had indicated he was willing to sit, but except he was in Kota Baru, and he said he'll come back the next day, and he was called to sit, he will sit. But Hashim Yop Sunny, when approached to sit, he said, what you're doing is a revolution, and he refused to sit. So that is why he was not part of the panel on the 2nd of July.
Right. Philip Koh, you were the most junior, I think, of all of the councils involved in this particular second tribunal. Apart from obviously carrying bags, making tea, making sure the curry puffs were warm, did you actually have any interaction with the Tun Salleh Abas team, perhaps to draw on their experience during the first tribunal or to get some tips on how to handle this?
That question, short answer is no, but since I have the floor, I will speak a few more minutes. When it happened, I remember Abigail, you came to my small room. I was a junior lawyer in screen. There's a race to the junior because Darryl Gun said he's more junior. So I said, yes, okay, you're younger. And we asked ourselves, what's the point of practicing, right? If this can happen. And I never knew that I would be one of the chosen to help, perhaps because they assume, and as a bit of an impersonator syndrome I have, I'm an academic, so I probably can do some research other than carrying bags. But Cecil, I'd like to make a quick on you. I remember we teased you with the name Page Boy because Yusofi said page, and then you have to show the page.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Well, thank you very much for that.
But okay, but something more serious. One of the opening statement of Tan Sri Yusofi was he said, in the flesh, I saw that Section 9 of the Court of Judicature Act. I have the jurisdiction, not just the rule in the order. In the flesh, it is. And if you look at paragraph 911, ominously, of the tribunal, Edgar Joseph, Eager Joe's writing, he make a jibe at that comment. The true meaning of this Section 9.1 of Court of Judicature Act is not ascertainable with the speed of lightning or even upon a cursory examination. As a junior, I was just stunned, all right, that, of course, I didn't know that Edgar would write this, all right? The point is, in the face of such luminaries, the stories that I saw in the front line was utterly fascinating for me. Constitutional law comes alive in visceral existential situation. Choices have to be made by such judges, choices that result on them being faced with what I would term, borrowing a phrase, that when powers collide, can an irresistible force, if you think the judiciary power has, when it meets an immovable object in the form of Dr. Mahathir and his cohorts, which made a reply to what judicial power is shown to be indeed very fragile. And that is a discussion later in the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Can I come to Mr. Robert Lazar? Robert, what was the feeling among the lawyers when you knew you had a task of effectively cross-examining a sitting Supreme Court judge in Dato Harun Hashim, who was slaughtered to give evidence, and of course the Chief Registrar, Haida, who I'll come to in more detail with Wilfred a bit later, and also sitting registrars of the court. Well, what was the feeling among the lawyers? How you all dealt with that?
I don't think we approached it any differently than we would have done with any other witness, because they were all there as witnesses of fact. So as far as Tan Sri Harun Hashim was concerned, he was there ready to narrate what had happened in Kota Baru on the Saturday, on the Friday and the Saturday, and so there was really no great difficulty. I think as far as the registry, those from the registry, I remember, I think the registrar at the time in Kota Baru was Gunalan, who I think I cross-examined Gunalan. And again, there was really nothing controversial about that. So, and what I want to say is that as far as the registry staff were concerned, I think they were far more cooperative and open about what had happened as opposed to the judges.
Tan Sri Ariff, I'll come to you now. You obviously, you were an academic, you were in University Malaya for this. Obviously, you have keen interest in constitutional law. And then at that particular time, you are sitting in the eye of the storm, basically in the biggest constitutional crisis this country has ever faced. Since Malaysia always has constitutional crisis. As I suppose a scholar, right, an academician, what's your, when you were asked to be involved in this in the team, what was your first reaction?
First reaction was very obvious. I don't know whether I was asked or I volunteered.
Okay, right.
It's still hazy. I think I spoke to Cecil and I asked,
Yeah.
I think whether I'd be interested. And of course, I said yes. Because I was doing constitutional law, teaching constitutional law for donkey's years, 11 years, you know. And then I was relatively junior at the bar
Yeah.
because I spent my life teaching. And one of the cases I did was Bethelson together with Shafi,
Yes.
an ordinary case. But I was very surprised that it became a pawn in the flesh of the government.
Yes.
Yeah, simple case. Whether someone should be given the right of hearing, right to revocation of employment permit. We got the case. We got the ruling in our favor. And everything broke loose. But this was the setting then. And of course, we read the papers, and there was a big deal of hoo-ha about the judges not interpreting the law as they should be interpreted, and so on. So it's a long story, you know. I suppose if you all have the time for it, you can look at the Hansard in 1988, and you'll find how horrendous it was. So judges were under siege.
Yeah.
Independence of the judiciary was more or less in shreds. As far as the executive is concerned, we hold power. You have to interpret the way that we want judges to interpret. And that was the scenario. So of course, I didn't think twice about it. I said, yes, I'll be glad to be part of the team. As junior counsel, didn't have to carry bags and all that. Okay. But I remember Hazri Azmi wanted two good cross-examiners. And we have Christopher Fernando and Ghazi. I'm supposed to be the one filling in with the research.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Sorry, coming back to Mr. Wong again. You were the team that acted for Tan Sri Wong Sulaiman. Now, the charges that were laid against the 5 judges, obviously the charges against Tan Sri Wong Sulaiman were the most serious because he faced the most charges as well. Because he called the judges back from Kota Baru, and he also vacated the sitting in Supreme Court sitting in Kota Baru. So was there a deliberate or specific defense that you all had devised for Tan Sri Wong Sulaiman, or was that in any way different from the rest of them?
There was hardly any differences between the judges in the way they approached the problem. A little bit of gossip. Actually, Wong Sulaiman was a very quiet man. He didn't want to get involved, and he was not involved. But one other clever judge went up to him and said his name, I can't remember what he calls him. He's always known as Baba Black Sheep or something like that. Twinkle, twinkle, little star sort of thing, So he challenged him and said, there are 2 judges ahead of you who should be disqualified. You are the most senior. You should now take over the reign and appoint or empanel the judges to hear the hearing. So, of course, Wong Sulaiman, being a nice chap, took on the challenge and said, okay, I would do that. And he made a call he told George Seah, don't go to Kota Baru, stay back. And then George Seah this is a bit of gossip, then contacted Harun, who was Justice Harun, who was then in Kota Baru, to say, cancel the hearing, postpone the hearing or whatever, come back. And the next thing we heard was the news went to Hamid. This is a little bit of gossip which I got from my other judges who gossiped to me. So that's where Hamid got wind that something was brewing among the judges. And that's how the first panel came about. And so when we worked together, the question of whether he was the most, he has the most burdensome thing never arose. We all worked as a team. And honestly, I was just telling Philip, none of us actually knew what the removal of judges law is. We have to hunt for books, photostat copies. Those days we don't have online. And we just have picked up. You remember the She Street book?
Yeah.
That's our textbook for
Swan Street.
removal of judges. So, so to answer your question, apart from the gossip, we had no particular defense for him alone. It's all the same. And if you look at the charges, it's about the same, except he was charged with a heavier burden of empaneling. That's it.
Yes, just to follow on what Mr. Wong said, Tan Sri Cecil, this is for you. We know Tan Sri Sulaiman was charged with the most serious offense because he was actually accused of actually scuttling the hearings in Kota Baru. Dato Loh Siew was basically accused of insubordination because he came back. But you acted for Yusofi Abdul you acted, and there were two other judges, of course, Tan Sri Azmi and Tan Sri Wan Hamzah. So my question is this. Those judges, which is Yusofi Abdul Wan Azmi and Hamzah, did they all decide to take a common defense or they took their own path, their legal teams? What do you mean?
Well, I think the three, Justice Tan Sri Yusofi, Justice Tan Sri Azmi, and Tan Sri Wan Hamzah, they would have a similar defense because they would have taken the position that Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman being the most senior judge.
Yep.
And in view of the fact that Tan Sri Hamid was in the tribunal, and therefore they felt that pursuant, I mean, Tan Sri Yusofi probably told them that in pursuant to Section 9 of the Courts of Judicature Act, that he was, Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman was entitled in the circumstances to convene a court. And as they were members of the Supreme Court, the three of them can. And I think that was the basis on which the tribunal, at the end of the day, found the three of them not guilty of anything such. So as far as the three of them were concerned, I think that was the defense that is going to take place. And insofar as Tan Sri Azmi was concerned, he was really not around because he was attending meetings of the Association for the Blind.
Yes.
And, and I think he just received a call and said that the Supreme Court is sitting. He came and sat, not quite knowing what was happening. So in the circumstances, all the more that the three judges were acquitted unanimously by the tribunal as such.
I suppose a clear case of justice is blind. But to follow on, Tan Sri, before I pass on back to Alex, you mentioned just now that it's no probability Tan Sri Yusofi is the one that brought this argument up. The way you described him, quite clearly, he was the biggest personality. Could you just give us all here a snapshot? How was him as an advocate? But we hear a lot of stories of him as a judge.
Yeah. Okay.
How was he as an advocate?
I mean, he made the opening submission. He also made the submission with regard to the recusal of Hashim Yomsani. I think he told him in no uncertain terms. He says, Tan Sri, you have to step down because you are a member of the judges when they decided to write the letter. You then decided not to participate. And then of course he told him the law on bias and recusal and so forth. And so he made that submission, and the rest of us then adopted the submission that was made. And we got the feeling that, and I agree with what Wilfred is saying. I mean, we just got the feeling that as far as Hashim Zubsani was concerned, he was going to step down because he probably was thinking of it. Look, something, I mean, as far as his 5 judges are concerned, they may all get convicted or some may get convicted. And then, after Tun Hamid, I will be the most senior judge. And he eventually became the Chief Justice of Malaya. So maybe for that reason, he stepped down. We don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Alex?
Just to move on, I think everyone's been dying to hear this. Earlier, I mentioned actually the question about there was this issue about the lawyers wanting to use Tan Sri Hashim Yusufzai and also Tan Sri Harun Hashim were to be called as witnesses for the 5 judges. But in the report, in the second tribunal report, Justice Edgar Joseph actually remarked, and his remark was this, that after the cross-examination of Encik Haida, the lawyers informed the tribunal that they were not going to call the 2 judges anymore. Now, we all know that you cross-examined Encik Haida. Can you tell us what actually happened and what was the startling discovery that you made during the cross-examination?
This story has been going around for the last 38 years. And it's taken different routes, different tones, and it also has different sides to it. But let me put it this way, in very simple terms, but remember, it was 38 years ago. I was, as you know, I was representing Justice Wan Hamza, and the Chief Registrar was then Haida, and he came on, and it was a question of how the attitude of the staff in relation to allowing these proceedings, that is the proceedings of the 5 judges, to go on. As you know, I think it was Daryl who said that the doors were locked earlier on, they're not open. He had to get the policeman to come and get it. And then what was happening was, as far as we were concerned, or at least as far as I was concerned, the Chief Registrar was actually taking instructions from Justice Hamid not to allow the hearing to go on and do everything in him to stop it or slow it down. As they were saying in the first tribunal, they were also trying to rush the decision out. So that is when I asked him this very question. Said, you were taking instructions from a litigant. Is that correct? He refused to answer. And I think the judges, if I'm not mistaken, especially the judge from Sri Lanka, looked at him and smiled and said, he didn't say anything. Then we said, why did you take these steps? Hiding the seal. The seal was actually hidden in the cupboard. Again, no answer. So it is that reason that I had to cross-examine him. Well, many people say rather awkwardly, but I think it was necessary to do so.
Thank you, Wilfred. More importantly, did you ever appear before Haida after that?
Was this is the reason why you turned to arbitration? Was it?
You hit the nail on the head.
There you go.
No, but you see, this is where my memory doesn't serve me well. I think he became Justice Haida shortly after the 1988 trial. I'm not sure whether he was serving in KL or he was outside. So yes. In those circumstances, I think I did not appear before him, but I have met him socially at a common friend's place, and we were talking. We talked about everything else except the tribunal, of course.
You know, so I hope that answers your question. But you are right. I went into alternative dispute resolution soon after the tribunal. Yes.
Dato Loh Siew Cheang, this is for you. You were there, and and Tun Sufyan was called as a witness. Tun Sufyan Hashim was called as a witness. The report by Tan Sri Aiger Joseph quoted him extensively. Unfortunately, Tan Sri Aiger did not agree with a number of his views. Could you just tell us what was the thinking of the team? Why did you call Tun Sufyan? Was it some sort of an expert witness kind of thing? The other mic, Dato'.
I think the seniors have made the decision. I was just a junior. But I could understand why they did it.
Yeah.
He's a man of impeccable honesty and integrity. And we think that it may prevail upon them, especially the Sri Lanka judge, etc., that things may be different from your jurisdiction and ours. So I think it was along those lines that we say the court of Sofia to come in and give evidence. And I vividly remember that when he walked in, there was murmur amongst the members. And I think that was the reason why we called Tun.
Alex, once again, just to follow up on that, Dato', could I just keep you 1 second on more? So how was he cross-examined by Tan Sri Abu Talib for the AG? Was he aggressive? Was he polite?
I think that Tan Sri Abu Talib asked him a question, he gave an answer, and there's a full stop. Can't go any further. That's that man.
Right.
Okay, I think we just got to move on, Razlan, because we're running out of time.
Right.
I'm just going to ask this question. It's actually not in the script at all. It's simply this. You had a situation where two out of the three judges were found guilty of the charges. That is Tan Sri Wan Sulaiman and Tan Sri George Sia. They were then both removed from office. The other three judges went back. They were told to go back. They were free to go back to being judges again, back to the judiciary. Did any one of you get any inkling after that decision as to how that was for them? Because they were accused of the most heinous crime of misbehavior. And perhaps I'll ask the most senior members first, Tan Sri Cecil and Mr. Wong, if you had any inkling as to how it felt for them to actually go back into the judiciary after going through this whole episode.
Well, I think after the three of them were reinstated in their positions, what I found as far as the Supreme Court was concerned is the three of them were only asked to deal with cases which were not important as such. If the case was of a constitutional nature or it was involving government or something, Hamid would not have these three on the panel as such. And by that time, of course, there were other new judges appointed to the Supreme Court to sit. So I think that was a position. And I think generally the three of them were quite disappointed. And I think they were just bidding their time until they retired from the bench.
Can I just follow up with that?
And all that I can say is this. When there was one occasion when I did appear before one of the, maybe two or three of these judges, and they ruled in my favor, my opponent, who shall be nameless, said, well, they were your clients, hence they ruled in your favor. So that was the kind of things that were happening within the bar, because there were certain members of the bar who did support people like Tun Hamid, and they were rewarded. They were made judges, you know. And there were also members of the bar who organized functions for Tun Hamid when he went around the country sitting of the federal court. Because the bar said, we're not going to call him to any of our annual dinners as such. So that was the situation.
Insofar as the three judges are concerned, I represented Tan Sri Wan Hamza. Tan Sri Wan Hamza, when he was suspended, had only 6 months left.
of his tenure. So when he was reinstated, he actually did not sit as a federal court judge anymore. You know, he was writing out any judgments that were due. And so he never actually sat on the bench with the other judges. In this regard, I want to say something about Tan Sri Hamza. In view of the fact that he had only 6 months to retire, I actually had a chat with him and said, look, you know, the judge, you have only about 6 months to retire. Do you want me to approach the Attorney General's chambers and see if something can be worked out? And his answer was short and terse. He said, look here, I have done nothing wrong. I was not asked to sit on this. I sat on my own accord. And if they want to decide to suspend me, so be it. And that was Tan Sri Hamza.
Right. I won't repeat the questions Gopal asked about whether we've recovered and all that, but this goes to, I think, Robert Lazar, because I think it has certain, I suppose, resonance among us here today. In 2008, you led the Malaysian bar team in the VK Lingam inquiry. And in that inquiry, former prime ministers was called, testified, questioned. Former Lord Presidents too were asked, testify and question. So 2 questions. Number 1, did it give you flashbacks of the 1988 tribunal that you said here? Firstly. And secondly, when you were doing that inquiry, the VK Lingam inquiry, did you say to yourself, well, we are here today, 20 years later, because of the events of 1988?
Okay, your first question, I think the situation is very different. The events of 1988 and 2008, though I think, and I'll come to your second question now, there was definitely a link. I think the seeds of the judicial decline were planted in 1988. They germinated, right, and came to full life in 2008. All right, that's how I look at it. And the link was clearly recognized by the administration at the time, because I think you recall that after the Royal Commission, these 5 judges were then told that as far as the administration was concerned, that what happened in 1988 was an injustice to them. So belatedly, the matter was put right. So definitely the link was there.
Thank you very much. I think we've run out of time. Could I just wrap up to say this, to follow on to Sejwe and what Robert said? Yes, that was absolutely right. The administration at the time recognized what happened to these judges was an injustice. But could I say, ladies and gentlemen, that these advocates in front of you today were the ones that fought for them, that eventually, 20 years later, justice was served for their clients.
Just very quickly, we don't actually have time, but I'm just going to put it out there. Questions on the floor, just very quickly. 2 questions, sorry.
Two questions.
No, sorry. Questions first, sorry. Statements later. Questions first. Anyone with any questions?
Could I just ask, what was the personal cost to all of you taking on the brief to defend the 5 judges, to your families and the like?
Yes.
Well, I think at that point in time, I was with Sean Delamo, and one of the consequences is shortly after we went back to practice, we were removed from the panels of Petronas and a whole lot of GLCs, Bank Negara. And rumor has it that some of our income tax returns were looked at. And those of us who had loans from GLC banks, they were asked if we were in default, foreclose. And this continued for about 3 or 4 years. And I recall Terengganu decided to sue Petronas. And the and Tan Sri Hassan called me and said, can I see him? I went to see him. And he said if I could act for Petronas. And the General Counsel then told him that I was on a blacklist. And shortly after that, I think the blacklist was slowly removed. So that was some of the consequences that firms like us, Shuklin, Screen, Zain had to face. But, fortunately, we had some loyal clients, and those loyal clients saw us through those difficult times as such.
Anyone else?
I'd like to say it was very interesting that when Sapin walked into the room just before that or around that, the then Attorney General started by saying, last night I read a book titled Kill All Lawyers. Well, this is a misappropriation of Shakespeare. And since I'm at Shakespeare, Yusofi says double, trouble, power and trouble. We were 3 ladies having tea. And the Attorney General, he looked at Tan Sri Abu Talib, very sad because they are friends. The Attorney General says double, double, trouble, tall and trouble. As a young academic just practicing, I realized these issues are so important. And the thought came to me that Justice Brandai, one of the great Supreme Court judges of USA, Supreme Court judges ought to have more than a chance encounter, acquaintance with the classics. Many of us are not. Unfortunately, I'm not saying that we have to be. And at the interim, there was a judge I won't mention, someone coming to Yusofi and say, Yusofi, what is it? It's very interesting. Double, double, tall and trouble. He said, it's Macbeth, stupid.
All right, on that note, can I just please ask all of you once again to say thank you to all this wonderful gentlemen. And on behalf of Endeavour and everyone else, thank you very much for turning up today. Thank you so much.
I've just been asked by all my fellow sponsors to say a few words in closing, and it is going to be in closing. The story of how this event came together is one I'm happy to share over drinks later. It'll take too long. But what does need to be conveyed is our gratitude to so many people. First and foremost, to the 2 teams, the Tun Salleh Abas team, the 5 judges team. I will say this to you about them. The idea to do this was sparked on Good Friday in April. By Easter Monday, every one of them had agreed. It took that little time. To me, this speaks of their understanding of the importance of recording these events and, of course, their generosity. Second, the sponsors. I need to thank Lim Chiwi Partnership, whose arm I'm going to twist for events in the future. And of course, Azman and the team from Ramat Lim. Endeavour, GLP, my fellow members of Chambers and Endeavour Advocacy Project. It's young lawyers, many of whom are here tonight. I hope you have a chance to speak to them. They've contributed as well. And for Advocates of Podcast, it's just too good an opportunity to let pass. So thank you, one and all. So there remains only 2 groups to thank. The first is all of you, because without you being here and the energy that you brought to the room, this would have been a very, very dull evening, very dull. But it's not just the energy. I think what really struck me when Adlin and the team were telling me about the numbers that were building up coming to this. It shows your appreciation, I think, of how important these events are. And I think what it shows is that they don't just trace our history, and I think you appreciate this. They don't just trace our history, they chart our future. And I think that is why we've got this many people in the room tonight. So thank you all. Thank you very, very much for being here. Finally, but foremost, can I, on behalf of all the sponsors, thank Adeline and her team from Chambers Lab. Eddie, Karen, Bella, Jen, all of you guys have just been quite remarkable. I called them on Easter Monday when I managed to capture all these, these guys to come. And I said, let's do this on the 22nd of May. That's 3.5 weeks. They did not blink. They delivered, and you can see how well they have. So thank you guys, really, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Right, so that said, we are done. Can I just suggest we charge our glasses in that corner over there, and then we can have a drink and a chat. Thank you very much for being here tonight.